Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us for Arthritis Talks, Unlocking Physical Activity with Assistive Devices. I'm Dr. Sean Bevan, Chief Science Officer at Arthritis Society Canada. Now, we've come together for this event from many different places, and I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which I am located on and on which our Toronto office stands, which is the traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation, Anishinaabeg, Huron-Wendat, and Haudenosaunee Indigenous peoples. Today, this meeting place is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and I am so grateful to have the opportunity to live with my family and work on this land. Now, being active really is one of the best things that you can do to manage your arthritis. Yet, we know that physical activity for someone living with arthritis may look a little bit different than it does for someone else who isn't affected. And fortunately, there are tools available that can help you be active despite a diagnosis of arthritis. Today, physiotherapist Michael Pohlmann and occupational therapist Tara Stier are here to answer your questions about physical activity and how assistive devices can help you unlock the benefits of movement. So before we get started, a few logistics. This webinar is best viewed on a laptop or desktop computer. If you have any technical difficulties, please email arthritistalks@arthritis.ca for assistance. If you have a question for one of our presenters, you can submit it through the Q&A button at the bottom middle of the screen. We'll get to as many questions as possible during the hour that we have together. You can click on the chat icon in the bottom middle of the screen to access the chat and connect with other participants, as well as our chat moderator. And if you'd like to close the chat completely, just click the red X icon. We are also pleased to provide captioning of our webinars to accommodate the diverse needs of our audience, and you'll see that running along the bottom of the page. So many questions that we received in advance did follow similar themes, so we'll look at those first before going into a live Q&A. And before we get started, I wanted to thank our event partners, Massage Addict, our exclusive event presenting partner, who you will also have the opportunity to speak with at their virtual information booth following the webinar. In addition to the support of Massage Addict, we are also grateful to Pfizer, United Way Winnipeg, and others for their financial support of our Arthritis Talk series. So with that, let's get started, and a very warm welcome to today's experts, Michael Pohlmann, who is joining us from Victoria, BC, and Tara Stier, who is joining us from Toronto, Ontario. So Tara, let's start with you. We often tell people living with arthritis that it's very important to remain physically active. Yet that seems a little bit contradictory given that many people are living in pain. So can you elaborate a little bit on why physical activity is really so important for people living with arthritis?
Yes, absolutely. Hello, everybody. Thanks, Sean. So the simplest answer is moving feeds the joints. It lubricates the joints. And so when we move, it helps to increase circulation. We know that physical activity brings nutrients to the joints to help strengthen cartilage and soft tissues around it. So ligaments and muscles around a joint can stay strong or even get stronger. It also helps improve our bone density, which reduces the risk of osteoporosis as well. It also helps to lessen arthritis symptoms, which I'll talk about in a later slide, and disease activity. So it may help the potential to reduce inflammation in the body. And it reduces the risk of other health conditions, things that are common like diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, etc. So before we speak more about the benefits for arthritis, first, it's important to understand that physical activity and exercise are not exactly the same thing. Both are very beneficial. There is a little bit of a difference, and so we need both. Physical activity is any activity that involves our body. So it requires energy, it requires full body movement, and it's done as part of leisure, recreation, work, active transportation, or household tasks. Therapeutic exercise is a type of physical activity that is planned, it's structured, and it aims to maintain or improve one or more components of our physical fitness. And it's usually done with concentration and awareness of good posture and alignment. So, this is not an exhaustive list. So, we know now that exercise can help reduce the risk of a lot of other comorbidities. But when we live with arthritis, we see specific benefits with this population. People with OA or osteoarthritis and other kinds of arthritis as well, if you are coming with an inflammatory type 2, people who are active, they have less pain compared to those people who are not active. And if we are taking any kind of pain medication, we find that we may require less, or we might even be able to stop some of those pain medications altogether. We also get an endorphin release. Happy endorphins, natural chemicals, are released when we exercise. So we get this high feeling from exercise. It's one of the best ways to improve sleep, which may be one of your symptoms of arthritis: lack of sleep, trouble falling asleep, staying asleep. So we find that when people are active, they have better sleep, which ultimately means less pain. Exercise is one of the greatest ways to improve our mood and is a number one treatment for depression. So we know that living with arthritis can significantly impact our mental health. And so makes physical activity even more important. People who are active as well, they usually have a little bit more self esteem. They're feeling pretty good about themselves and what they're doing. If we're thinking about joint protection and prevention of further damage, further progression, regular exercise along with a diet change will help people to lose weight, which that serves as a joint protection strategy for the progression and worsening of arthritis symptoms. We know that energy levels can improve when we are active. It can add some fun to our day. And then when we're thinking about stress, it's known to decrease stress when we are active. And ultimately, if we have better stress management, this is going to translate into less pain. And then function. So, regular exercise can make it easier for you to do the things that you want to do, and even things that we might not even think about, like running up and down the stairs or bending down to tie our shoes. It can prevent further disability and help facilitate improved function. The mark there that says build new cartilage with a question mark. So, we know a few things, but there's still research undergoing. So we do know that cartilage needs to be loaded in order to rebuild, and that moderate loading may help to stimulate formation of new cartilage. So, when we think about cartilage, we describe it like a sponge. So, we know that osteoarthritis leads to the breakdown of cartilage, but we no longer refer to osteoarthritis as wear and tear. That's sort of out of our dialogue now because it led people to believe that they should be avoiding physical activity. When in fact, cartilage and bone need moderate activity and load to regenerate itself. And so, if we think about it in the sponge theory, articular cartilage does not have any blood supply. So it's not getting any nutrition. So the only way it gets nutrition is through something called the synovial fluid, which is fluid that surrounds a joint in a capsule. So there's a nutritional exchange that happens through dynamic loading and unloading. So things like walking, cycling, exercises we'll discuss in further slides. So healthy cartilage is like a sponge. When it's compressed, just like a sponge being squeezed to release the waters into the bucket, it releases impurities and garbage from the cartilage. And then when the pressure is released, we let go of the sponge in the bucket and it absorbs the nutrients from the synovial fluid. So, again, this process is essential to healthy cartilage and is fostered through loading. So, again, any kind of exercise, and we think of walking, cycling, swimming, weight training. So, this sort of unloading loading theory is one of the reasons why physical activity is so important for the maintenance and potentially the progression and enhancement of our cartilage, especially when we have arthritis.
Thank you so much, Tara, for that really thorough answer. I really love that sponge analogy. Michael, could you touch on what exercises really are best for people living with arthritis?
I certainly can, and thank you very much. I appreciate the privilege of being able to speak with you today, and to be able to come to you from the unceded lands of the Esquimalt and the Songhees nations here in southern Vancouver Island. So, thank you to everybody on the call, and thank you to the Arthritis Society for setting this up. So, best exercises for people living with arthritis. It seems like a simple question, but it doesn't necessarily have a simple answer. There are some things that we need to think about to figure out what we're bringing to this new engagement with our bodies and with trying to self-manage our arthritis. One of the first things we want to look at are the different types of arthritis that there are. So we have many, or not arthritis, I should say exercise. There are many different things, and research has shown that most people know the different types of exercise that are out there. Strength training, resistance, stretching, cardiovascular and aerobic training to get our heart rate and our lungs moving a little bit more effectively. Range of motion, which is something maybe not everybody knows, but which is very important, and core stability and balance. Now, with those things, though, how do I tease out the best things for me to start moving? And that's where we have to start looking individually. We've got to look in ourselves and say, what are the things that I'm bringing to this engagement? So, first of all, we need a combination of all those things. But let's look at what are the things that your body is bringing? Are you a really flexible person? Are you somebody who's not very flexible? Have you had a lot of experience with exercising in the past? Or are you somebody who maybe wasn't that active in the past? Have you had injuries? Have you had surgeries? Are there other things that somebody else with the arthritis in the same joint might not be, they might be able to do more or less than you can? So, how do we look at that individually, the things you're bringing? The other things that I think are very important to look at is what am I bringing emotionally to this? We live in a society that is really quite adept at making us feel shamed and making us feel like we're not succeeding at things, making us feel like we failed. And in fact, I hear that word quite a bit. So those emotional things that we bring into this new engagement with our body and looking at our arthritis is just as important as the physical things we're bringing in. Once we look at those different aspects of ourselves individually that we bring in, we want to look at how do we use our body? Am I somebody who sits at a desk during quite a bit of the day? Do I work in an airport where I'm walking all over the place? Do I work in Costco where I'm going back and forth to the shelves? I'm doing some standing work at the cashier. I'm all over the place and doing a combination of different things every single day that I'm there. Those activities are going to say, if you're sitting quite a bit, let's get you doing some standing and some moving activities. If you're going to be quite active, maybe you need to do some more sedentary things, working on some strength training, working on some other types of resistance building, and or perhaps some stretching that you haven't had a chance to do during the other active parts of your day. So those are the two most important things we have to look at, that we're bringing our personal attributes and also what we're doing with our body. From there, we want to start looking at some fairly simple exercise principles. One of the first things is looking at how we get stability for our body so we can keep stability for our arthritic joints. With that area, even though it's number 5 that I have on this list, the first thing we want to look at is the core. Just like the core of an apple is the center of an apple, the core of your body is the center of your body. So we want to start looking at getting that core stability nice and stable. First of all, that doesn't mean doing sit-ups. It doesn't mean doing Pilates. It means really just working with our foundational core exercises and try to get that firmness down there so that then when we work out to our shoulders and out to our other extremities, we can actually have some stability for those joints. And so one of the first and best places to start for almost anybody is with the core. Unless somebody has done quite a bit of that, it can be really good to find somebody who can help you understand the core a little bit more. And it's one of the things we talk about here at the Arthritis Center, pretty much with every client that we see. From that area, after we start with the core to work out, we always want to start low and go slowly. And this is where things can become a little bit of a challenge. Starting low and going slowly means we often want to start below what we want to be feeling. And again, we live in a society where I should be feeling it, should be harder, stronger, faster. I should go for it. I should finish that workout feeling like I'm exhausted. But when it comes to arthritis, it's better if we start below that threshold of turning on that pain response, because believe it or not, the pain response is your body wanting to protect you. We want to say, no, we're safe. We can start here in a safe position. We can move ahead with this exercise program, and you can trust me that I'm going to do it with wisdom, and we're going to be letting our body get stronger as we get used to the things that we're doing. So the starting low and going slowly is a really key thing. Now, as I said, even if things are difficult, even if you've got some sort of inflammatory arthritis, even if you're not sure where to go, range of motion is a really good exercise to start doing for all of your joints that are arthritic as well. Now, with range of motion, though, the key thing is we want to take force off the joint. We want to allow it to open up and then move it through its freely available range. We want to try to get as much range in each joint, at least 1 repetition per day. But if you're having a flare, if your joint's really painful, just moving it where you can without putting load on the joint is going to go a long way to helping nourish that joint, as Tara was just saying, in terms of the synovial fluid and the sponge. It also opens up so all the different corners of that joint capsule can be flooded with that nutrient-rich synovial fluid. Then we can take away those metabolic waste products and the body can change those things over. So for most people, range of motion can be a really safe way to go. I've got to be honest though, if you're dealing with arthritis, one of the best things you can do is get an assessment from an arthritis professional. So you know the types of things you want to be more aware of, what your individual joints are like, especially in the areas that you're having concerns of those joints. And you can get a little bit better idea of what might be some other exercises that you can start with. Without being able to assess you, I can't with good conscience say, you should do this, because I don't know. You're going to be the one bringing that wisdom, and that's where we can continue when we get that whole process started. Now, some other frequently asked questions I hear: I walk a lot. Do I really need to do these other types of exercises? As I said, yes, it really is important to have a combination. Walking is a really good activity, but it's one of the most efficient ways for our bodies to get from point A to point B, which means we don't use our full range of motion. We're not using and really exerting our stress or our resistance of the muscles. And we're also not getting our bodies up to a cardiovascular level that helps the hearts, the lungs get a little bit stronger and be able to pump that fluid around more effectively. So walking is very good, but it's only part of an exercise program. We do need some of those other things depending on what your body's like. Other question, is no pain, no gain really true? This becomes a little bit tricky because when you've got arthritis, you might have some pain while you exercise. But the way many different professional bodies in the world have looked at helping people to understand their pain is the 2-hour pain rule. So if you have some arthritis, you might do some exercise, you might have some pain while you're doing that exercise. It might last up to 2 hours after you finish doing that exercise, but then it should stop. If you have achiness that night, if you have achiness the next day, if you didn't sleep well because you're really stiff, probably means that you've taken your body a little bit too hard. And so the next time we want to back off a little bit and then see if that 2 hours still happens in that same way. You again might have some pain. It might last for 2 hours. I should say this is with osteoarthritis. If you have inflammatory arthritis, which is like rheumatoid arthritis or psoriatic arthritis or ankylosing spondylitis and other arthritis like that, you look at the 1-hour pain rule, but the same applies. Pain while you're doing it, it would last for an hour afterwards, but then it should stop. One of the challenges for a lot of people is that they say, I try this, but it doesn't hurt while I'm exercising. It hurts the next day. If that's a situation, I say, let's look at the 50% mark. Let's take you back to half of what you did that one day and see how you feel the next day. So instead of adding in more stuff or trying to push harder or trying to make things different, let's just go to half. And then between that 100% of what you did, which was painful, that 50%, which hopefully isn't as painful, we can start to work up a little bit closer and see how things are working for you. See if we can change some aspects of the way you're exercising or the exercises that you're doing and see if we can make them a little bit more efficient for you. Another question I get frequently is, I move a lot during the week. Do I really need to do anything like range of motion? One of the things from these clients, I'm often hearing that they're moving, doing a lot of fairly demanding activities like gardening, working in their warehouse. So a lot of their activity at their job, especially if it's really physical. What's happening with these is that they've got pressure and they are building up some of those waste products that Tara was talking about when the cartilage breaks down, because that force causes the cartilage to be irritated a little bit. The range of motion is one of the best ways that we can, again, open up the joints. We take the load off so that those bone parts can open up and we move it freely so that synovial fluid can nourish and lubricate all parts of that joint. And so the range of motion is still very important for those people. And finally, when I start to feel better, do I need to keep exercising? I think this is something that almost all of us have experienced. And again, the answer would be yes. That combination of exercises is not only helping to balance out the things that we might naturally do, kind of talking about the physical activity that Tara was talking about, and then the things that we need to do, which are those what does she call that exactly? The physical exercise, the therapeutic exercise that she was talking about. When we balance those things out, we're learning more about our body, and we need to find out if things are changing. If we stop those exercises, we're most likely going to go back to where we started from and have the same pain and difficulty. If we keep them going, we're going to be learning as we go. Maybe I don't need this one. Maybe I've stretched that enough. Maybe I can start strengthening those things. And so keeping the exercises going, extremely important for people with arthritis, especially once they start to feel better. Now, how do I know if I've done enough physical activity? Oh, sorry, Sean.
No, that's great. I can see that this question is already coming up a lot in the chat. So yes, please go ahead. Help people understand the balance here.
No, I'm sorry for jumping in and stepping on your toes. I told myself not to do that.
Not at all.
So how do you know if you've done enough physical activity? This is one of the things that can be a really challenging thing for a lot of people. First of all, we have some really good guidelines out there from the Canadian Society of Exercise Physiologists, the World Health Organization, Arthritis Australia. Many different areas have got guidelines, and they let us know how much we should or could work towards in doing every week. The Canadian Society of Exercise Physiology has their 24 hours, and so looking at what you should be doing during 24 hours of the day. But we also need to look at that week and then look at our month and the other things that are going on as well. Guidelines are really important to see what could I be aiming for? What should I be aiming for? Because it let us know when we're doing too little. It also lets us know when we're doing too much. Some people come in to see me and they say, well, I've done the exercises, Michael. We set up this program and I'm still in a lot of pain. Well, what did you do? Let's look at how last week was. Well, I did the exercises 3 days a week for the strengthening. I tried to do some cardio 5 days a week. Did you do anything else? Well, yes, I worked in the garden all weekend on the Saturday and the Sunday, which was really hard. And I had to go and help a friend move. And then the other night I decided to go to a Pilates class and I went to an aerobics class. Well, that might be too much activity in that area. And so physical activity, the guidelines allow us to see what should I be aiming for? What might be too much and what might be too little. Now, with that, we also need to look at what is happening for your life as well. We're in December right now, so physical activity guidelines can seem a little bit unrealistic for some people when they're trying to do the Christmas shopping and getting the clients active and getting those other movements happening. So what we want to do is we want to try to take in those considerations as well. What's happening for me emotionally? I've had clients come in and say, I want to get to these exercises, but I just have too many other personal responsibilities, so I can't get to those right now. So think about it in terms of balance. You want to look at the things that are going to add balance to your activities. So with the balance, we want to look at enough rest and enough movement. We want to look at enough things that are dealing with me physically and enough things that are helping me deal with things emotionally. And also, what is going to be good for me is going to be different from what's going to be good for somebody else as well. So when you think about that balance, you want to bring in, think about what is my day like? What am I already doing with that day? And how much do I want to add to that day? I think one of the other key things when thinking about balance is we have to look at the fact that we can feel a sense of failure if we don't achieve all these things. And so balance is going to be a personal thing that has to be very compassionately approached for each one of us. Look at your day and say, am I actually able to put this in there? And if I can't, that's okay. I'm going to try something again tomorrow. And then if you look at your day again and say, well, I tried that again tomorrow, it actually worked well, I can continue with that. If it didn't work well, I'm going to go backwards a little bit. And I think I'll work on some of those other things and try just doing a little bit less, but look at the fact that I might need to factor in some other activities there as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael. Tara, let's turn it back to you. Could you touch on assistive devices and in particular exercise modifications that are often recommended for people with arthritis, really to make it easier for people to get active?
Yes, absolutely. So this is a good segue because Michael mentioned something very important, which he talked about a 2-hour rule. So what we also like to talk about is something called a 2-point pain rule. So before I show assistive devices, I'll touch on that very briefly. So similar idea with this 2-hour rule, we like to use a 2-point pain rule. So what this means is we like to take a stock of what is our pain before we start to exercise. So let's say our pain at baseline is kind of like a 4 out of 10. We'll take our knees and hips as an example. So before we start to exercise, pain is kind of, 3, 4 out of 10. When we're doing an exercise and after the exercise, we want to keep that pain increase within 2 points. So if we're at 3 out of 4 and then it's kind of creeping up to, 5, 6, that's okay. It's within that 2 points. If it's jumping more than 2 points, so that 3, 4, now suddenly we're doing something and pain's going to like 7, 8, 9, 10 out of 10, that's a really important sign for us to either back off, try a different type of exercise, modify it in some way, and get creative. So perfect segue to getting creative is assistive devices and modifications. So there are a lot of different things we can think about to make getting active easier. And the things I'm going to talk about again are not an exhaustive list. And I always encourage people get creative when thinking about assistive devices, modifications, and strategies to make things easier for you to set yourself up for success. So these are some of my sort of favorite and classic recommendations. So a nice kind of basic one is our mats. So we want to think about thicker type of mats, thicker yoga mats, even like a thicker type of gym mat, because this makes it a little bit more comfortable for us to lie on, to kneel on, to put pressure on our hands. If we don't have a thicker mat, we can also just kind of triple pad up our other mats so we can make it a little bit easier on those tender points. Similarly, there's something called yoga jellies. So they're little circle donut shaped things. And if you see them, what they do is they help to offset some of the pressure on pressure points. So areas like our wrists, areas like our knees, our bum muscles. So things that are a little bit more tender points, they have to offset the pressure. So that's something we can consider when we're doing any kind of mat exercises, anything like yoga, these sorts of things. The next thing we want to think about is positions. So if we are unable to get down to the ground, getting up and down is a challenge, we can think about using higher heights. So whether it's our bed, whether it's a couch, or even a chair, this is perfectly okay. And things like chair yoga or chair exercises, chair stretching are a fabulous way to get active and incorporate all the different types of physical activity. And I do believe there's some YouTube videos somewhere on our website for a chair yoga series. That's wonderful for people to get started with. My other most favorite one is walking poles. So there's different brands like Activator poles, Urban Poling. So if your goal is to get outside and walk more, but we're struggling with things like foot and ankle pain, hip and knee pain, spine pain. We're living in a remote area. There's uneven terrain, rocky grounds. Walking poles are a fabulous way to offset and offload some of the weight into our upper body to further protect the joints. So it will protect further our spine, hips, knees, and feet. And it's also a great way to add an extra cardiovascular component to walking because we're making use of our upper body as well. It helps significantly with balance. So if balance is becoming an issue, and again, we're feeling a little bit unsteady on our feet, having the poles does facilitate improved posture and better balance. So we might even feel a little bit more confident to do a bit more of a longer distance or longer time. When we think about strength training, this is sometimes a big issue for people. So let's say holding dumbbells or holding weights is too challenging for arthritis in our hands, as an example. We can consider things like ankle weights. So ankle weights, we can just put even around our wrist to get a good amount of resistance versus having to hold something heavy. Other things like stretchy bands or TheraBands are also a really great way to add some resistance, and they're a little bit more gentle on the joints and easy to hold as well. Again, with this line of holding, gripping, something simple like a pair of weightlifting gloves can be really helpful to cushion the hand joints, makes it easier to grip a little bit heavy weights, or even might allow us to participate in some mat exercises because we're getting a little bit of padding on the hands. We may need to consider something too a little bit more specialized, like a thumb or even a wrist brace, to help support those joints through activities. So, certain sports that people love to do, like tennis, golf, pickleball is all the hot topics. So we can consider that, maybe our joints, our thumbs, wrists are getting bothered with some of these activities. We may think about a brace to help support it through those sports. We also can consider which joints are particularly bothersome for us when we're active. So, is it our knee? Is it our elbow? Hands again? And we can think about braces or compression sleeves for some added additional support. So the research at this time, it doesn't support one kind of brace or one type of brace over another. So it is beneficial sometimes to speak to a therapist to just kind of gauge what kind of brace might be useful and even try out a few different kinds specific to your case, your sport, and activity. With things like grips, we want to think about building up our grips. So, again, whether it's golf, tennis, pickleball, the wider the grip, the easier it's going to be for us to hold it, especially when it comes to arthritis. And we find that there's a reduced risk of injury for common conditions like tennis elbow, golfer's elbow, that we see a lot of the time, more so in the summer, not so much right now in the winter, but building up our grips can really help improve that. Footwear is a huge topic. So, a good pair of shoes can really make getting active easier. So, we want to ensure we're wearing some sort of supportive running shoe that provides enough arch support, that's got a cushioned sole, that's got a firm heel counter. When we say firm heel counter, it means if you sort of poke the back of your shoe, if it just digs in, it's not firm enough. Something that's got like a deep, wide toe box, so nothing too narrow, and things that make a difference in our symptoms. So we always want to think bottom up. So if your feet are supported, it's going to help improve the alignment of your foot, subsequently your ankle, subsequently your knees, your hips, and your spine. So, depending also on how much you're walking, how much you're in those shoes, you may need to consider getting a new pair of running shoes every few years to make sure that they are remaining supportive enough. There are many different brands, styles. We could spend a whole presentation just on shoes, but it's important to try on different pairs. And us with arthritis, we can tell pretty quickly if a shoe is going to work for us or not. And just kind of something, a lot of the time we see very flat feet. So there's something called a rocker type of shoe that's got a little bit of a higher up. And so it does help with our natural gait cycle with something called a rocker type of shoe. But again, this is, we could go into so much detail on footwear. So hopefully that helps a little bit with that. If we're thinking about other modifications, we can think lower impact. So, activities again, walking, cycling, and swimming are all considered low impact cardiovascular exercises. If something like cycling, though, is a bit too difficult, we can think of other kinds of bikes. So, stationary bikes, recumbent bikes where we're sitting a little bit further back, even something like the QB, which is those kind of step foot pedals while we're sitting. My pitch for water and aqua therapy is we do way less in the water, and water has 12 times the resistance of air. So we get a very good amount of resistance training, that strength training, just by simply being in the water. And it does put a lot less stress on the joints. So people sometimes find that they can work a little bit harder to get their heart rates up for cardiovascular exercise. If we're wanting to join some kind of fitness class, an online video, we can look for things that maybe are titled lower impact, arthritis friendly, senior friendly. These types of videos might be helpful for us, and we can still modify as we need. And finally, while not shown in this picture here, is thinking about joint protection techniques. So this involves pacing our activities, planning what it is that we're going to do, and taking breaks within it as needed. So we'll go back to the walking example if this is your goal. We can think about joint protection within that goal. So for example, instead of saying, we're going to walk for 40 minutes to an hour at a time, it's a lot of buildup, a lot of pressure on the joints long term. So what might be more helpful and as a way to get started is doing 20-minute bout of walking, and then you repeat that 2 times in the day. So maybe you do a shorter bout in the morning, a shorter bout in the evening type of thing. It will allow your joints to recover in between those times. It's the same idea with strength training as well. So maybe we can think about doing 10-minute bouts, 3 times a day versus doing that one longer bout at a time. So it's all here about modifying, getting creative. And I know this can take a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, and a little bit of trial and error. But see it as a way to discover your body, discover what your limitations are, what things can help you. And hopefully, this provides a little bit of a gateway for you to see what might be possible with your bodies and arthritis.
Okay, that's amazing, Tara. So just before we get into some of the live Q&A from this evening, I thought I would ask, do either of you have any, final thoughts or recommendations that you haven't already covered that you wanted to share with our viewers?
One thing that I would like to say that I apologize, I forgot to mention when I was doing the talk, but the Canadian Society of Exercise Physiologists said that the optimum exercise that we want to try to be aiming for, those are the guidelines I was talking about, are about 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity exercise for aerobic benefit every day. So 5 days a week, 30 minutes will give you those 150 minutes. Now, as Tara was just saying, sometimes instead of 40 minutes, maybe you could try something a little less, try 30. But even if that's a challenge, you can break that 30 minutes into 10-minute chunks and still get the same benefit. And so the creativity issue is talking about in looking at what are the exercises that I'm doing that might be troublesome, and can I change those? Can I break them down? Maybe I'm going to use a little bit less resistance and try see how that works. Maybe I'll do it for less period of time. Like she said, instead of walking 40 minutes, try walking 20 minutes twice a day. And then if that works, perhaps you can bring that gap in between those two closer together, or maybe increase each one a little bit more. Again, it's got to come down though to what's going to work for you in your day. And so those guidelines are really helpful to start, but they're only part of the picture for what's really going to work for you with the arthritis that you're dealing with.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'll just say a quick note too. It's the season of goal setting, and always as we approach the new year, it gives people a chance to sort of reevaluate their lives, their goals, what they want to see for themselves in the new year. So it's this presentation's coming at a really nice time. And so I liked what Michael said something earlier about, things being safe. And so when it comes to exercise, sometimes, especially if we have a lot of pain and it's been a while since we've been active, there can be such a sense of fear around getting started. And so I love this idea of safety, right? We can think about setting ourselves up for success. So I often tell my clients when we're thinking about goal setting around physical activity, your confidence level should be 10 out of 10. Set yourself up a goal that you 100% feel confident that you can reach. So even if it's doing something for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, that's amazing. And we can start from there.
I would like to add to that. Sorry, Tara, that's excellent what you just said. Quite often when we talk about SMART goals, which I have a feeling probably many of you have heard about, a SMART goal is something that's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time limited. They talk about you want to be about a 7 out of 10 to have that chance of really kind of pushing yourself to do better. Tara's idea, though, of starting with something that's 100% is excellent, because if you can start something, say, I know I can fit that 5 minutes into my day, maybe you can get closer to those guidelines and things are not going to seem so arduous or so, I've got to start the new year suddenly getting 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous and aerobic exercise into my week. Not going to happen. And so I think that's a fantastic idea.
Amazing. So thank you both again for sharing all your knowledge with us this evening. Not surprising, we have lots of great questions coming in, so I'm just going to fire away and get started if that's okay. Tara, maybe I'll start with you for this first one, and Michael, feel free to add in as you like as we go. Questions here about, referring back to earlier in your presentation. Can you explain a little bit more about what is, when someone is being told that they have bone on bone, can you explain what that means? And then kind of a related question, can cartilage be rebuilt?
Okay, great question. So this is difficult because bone on bone, it's tough terminology that the rheumatologists, our physicians are telling us. And sometimes when, we see an x-ray, it might show that there's limited joint space or the cartilage is sort of thinned out or worn down where the bones essentially are almost coming together. So when a doctor or somebody's referring to it as bone on bone, what they're meaning is your joint space is lessened and the cartilage is very, very thinned or worn down. So that essentially is what bone on bone means. If we look at an x-ray, you can see that joint space very, very narrowed. So this can cause a lot of pain. What's interesting is cartilage itself doesn't actually have any nerve supply. So it's not the cartilage that's feeling the pain, but rather alignment issues, other kind of ligaments and maybe bone spurs kind of getting in the way. And so I forgot what was the part 2 of that question.
Really, the question was, can the cartilage be rebuilt?
Yes. Okay. So this is the big question mark. So the research right now is showing that when we are at that bone on bone stage, we cannot regrow that cartilage. But this is where the research is trying to come in, is there a way that once we've lost it, can we get it back? So I never want to say never, but at this kind of point, we can't regrow. But we do know that exercise provides a maintenance for that cartilage. So they did a really interesting study with runners, because a lot of the time people thought, oh, well, maybe running is going to further facilitate my arthritis. And they found that running actually served as a protective mechanism for people to regenerate that cartilage. So this is kind of, an iffy sort of answer, but the answer is if we do movement and when we do exercise, it can facilitate and maintain what we've got. But in terms of regrowing at a bone on bone stage, it might help still with movement, range of motion, function, but might not regrow at that point.
Right. So Michael, Tara, you just mentioned range of motion. So a few questions here. Could you give some specific examples of those range of motion exercises that you were talking about?
So one of the clearest ones and one of the easiest ones to understand is for knee arthritis, and it's a very common place that we get arthritis. Often where we see with X-rays, people being told that they're bone on bone. If you lie down on your back, and you can lie down on the firmest surface that you can safely and easily get back up off of, because getting off of something difficult, if you can't get on the floor easily, you're going to put your knees at a very high risk of injury and damage just by trying to get off the floor. And so do it on your bed, even if your bed's not as firm as the floor, if it's the safest place you can get off of, but the firmest you can do that. So if you lie down on your back is going to be supported, your pelvis and your hip area will be supported, and also then leave your heel on the bed. And what you do is you straighten and bend your knee. Since both sides are open, or since both sides are supported, I should say, your joint is opened up. And as you're moving them, you can pump that fluid around. It's going to help the nourishment. It's not going to give you the loading that running does for helping the cartilage to maintain. But you're all going to be getting that synovial fluid around to those different areas. For the elbow, one thing that you could think about doing is just resting your elbow down. And I'm going to bring my camera forward a little bit more so you can see me here. If I rest my elbow down on a table, so it's supported, I can straighten and bend my elbow in a way that I'm not having to lift a weight or move specifically like this. And so any way that you can get the force off of those joints is going to be quite helpful to being able to do the range of motion exercise.
And range of motion for hands too. I saw a lot of people before I had questions about the hands. A simple range of motion for the hands would be to make a full fist and open up nice and wide. That in itself is a good range. And if we do have already some bony deformities and joint changes, even if we can't make a full composite flexion, we say to people, there is a chance we can get back some of that range and at least maintain what we've got.
Great. So, Michael, in your experience, a few questions here. What is more effective, kind of individual exercise programs or when people are doing things in group settings?
You know, either one. It really depends on the arthritis. As Terry just said, for the hands can be fairly specific. And so we're going to be looking more at what are the very specific joints in your hands that might need an arthritis program and an exercise program, and trying to find somewhere in the community that won't be quite so easily. For things like hips and knees, there are some other programs out there. There's something called the GLAD program, which I have not been part of, but it's looking specifically at arthritis in those areas and trying to prevent people from really needing hip and knee replacements in many ways. Those programs can be good. And it also then comes down to those internal things. Do you like exercising in a group? If people like exercising in a group, finding a group to work out with can be a wonderful way to get that social connection, make sure you've got the motivation to go out. It might be, you know, I'm having a little bit of pain, but I still want to exercise because I want to see those people. And so there are other aspects and other benefits to doing those exercises. Not everybody likes a group. And so for them, taking that individual thing, being able to be at home, being able to do some exercises there would be better for them. The key thing is to try to find that combination that allows you to balance your regular physical activity things with the therapeutic exercise requirements that your body seems to be saying that you need. So there's not a clear, simple answer to that, but there are benefits of all the different things you try. And just quickly to add to that, as Tara mentioned before about TheraBand, any of those exercise bands, the lighter the color, the lighter the resistance. And it's amazing how many different combinations or how many different amounts of resistance you can get by just having a combination of 3 different types of bands. So you don't need to have an entire gymnasium at your disposal. 3 bands of different colors can allow you a huge variety of activities and exercises to do without breaking the bank. And it's something you can take with you when you travel as well.
Thanks, Michael. And I'm really glad you mentioned the GLAD program because we've had a few questions about that. So that was perfect timing. Tara, you mentioned a little bit about bracing. So a specific question here. How do you know when you should be trying a brace, in particular a knee brace or not, for example?
Mm-hmm. So with knee bracing, if it's something you've never tried before, there's really no harm in trying it. Let's say we'll take walking, even just general strength training exercises, cycling, and sports, right? If we're feeling like our knees are not stable, and there's a general sense of maybe feeling like it's giving way, a feeling like perhaps it's locking a little bit. There's usually a general sense of just instability within the knee, and you're getting pain, it might be something to try. The tricky part with the bracing is there's so many different styles, so many different brands. They all kind of look a little bit differently too. So it does become a bit tricky. Trying them on is important because something might, let's say you've been told you've got, patellofemoral syndrome or patellar instability, right? There's knee braces that are targeted towards stabilizing the patella, but they don't necessarily fit everybody or feel supportive at all. So if you are buying, and I know a lot of people are trying braces just from Amazon to give it a go, check the return policy, but it's not a bad idea to give something a try. And you can tell again pretty quickly if you're wearing a knee brace and you feel like it's giving you some support and it's allowing you to do an activity with a little bit less pain, then I think we're good to keep going with it. And typically knee braces are worn during activities. So when we're just at rest, we don't necessarily need to be wearing a knee brace because some of that support is coming from when we're loading or walking, standing, things like that. So through activities when we'd be wanting to wear it. So to kind of answer when and how do we know, if you're feeling like you've got some knee pain and instability, not a bad idea to try. You might need to try a few different styles to kind of land on the right one. Depending on where you live in Canada or I'm in Toronto, there's different places that are a little bit more geared towards bracing. And so you can always go to those stores and try on a couple different styles. But again, when you put it on, do a couple movements, a little bit of a walk, a little bit of a side to side, a little bit of a squat, and just kind of see, is it giving you the support that you want? And if it's not, we got to kind of try on something different.
Question here, Tara. Are there any assistive devices that people can use to help with things like dressing or washing? Examples about, reaching behind your neck, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. And as OTs, we love assistive devices. So I wish I had all these samples for you. So dressing, absolutely. And some of the struggles coming right from our shoulders, right? We can't reach behind our head. We can't lift to put a sweater on. Um, so there are a few things. There's something called a dressing stick, and essentially it's a nice long stick, and it kind of has a little poker here, and it does help you to put on things like your jacket, a sweater, because again, it reduces the need to have to sort of lift around us or over us. So if anyone's taking notes, you can kind of Google these images after to get an idea. So a dressing stick would be one. With the washing, we think long-handled devices. So we want to think about long-handled sponges, long-handled loofahs, and some of the long-handled sponges are actually quite curved. So we can have a nice wide handle and it just sort of, is curved and longed and helps us wash behind us. I know Dollarama always sells long-handled loofahs, so that's kind of a quicker, easy option. Just a nice like sponge, a little bit more long-handled. And then, there's things to help you put on your socks, like a sock aid to reduce the need to bend, long-handled shoe horns. So think kind of long-handled and things like that. And I forgot my other dressing thing was a button hook. So some of that fine motor becomes quite challenging for people. We're doing up our buttons. There's a wonderful device called a button hook. Again, it's got a nice wide handle, and on the end of it's just like a little stick thing, so we can slide it through our shirts and close the buttons as such. So it's a great way to help get dressed too. Hopefully that helps.
One thing I would add to what Tara just said, all those devices can be incredibly helpful, but it's amazing sometimes the stigma that they can have. And I have another people say, well, I don't want to try that. I don't want to look like I need a button holder. I don't want to look like I need a loofah. When it comes to working with arthritis, one of the best things we can do though is take off the force that we don't need to be putting on those joints. Rather than making ourselves do things that can be really painful, let's use that long-handled loofah or that dressing stick that allows me to get my jacket on, feel a little bit more comfortable. Then I can focus on the other things that I really want to put my time into to achieve my goals and not worry about putting myself through what can look like a pretty intensively painful day if I try to make myself do everything every day. So those devices, as they might seem like an aid, are incredibly helpful rehabilitation tools to help your joints to be better and to achieve the goals of being able to move stronger and more quickly and more effectively too.
And that's on that line of joint protection. So when we're thinking about preserving our joints, making sure things don't worsen, this is a fabulous thing to think about. And I know I'm so glad you said that, Michael, because there is a stigma attached to using assistive devices, but I think they're becoming trendy and we should all be using them no matter what age, because we want to have our energy on the things that matter most to us. So likely putting on your coat and struggling to wash your back are not top priority of importance. So we want to have our energy towards the things that are most important to us.
Hey, Michael, do you have any advice for people who are really struggling to get their joints moving in the morning in particular?
Well, one of the key things, and actually research has shown this, those range of motion exercises that I was talking about, as simple as they can seem, and as much as people often want to dismiss them, doing those gently before bed will set your joints up to be the most lubricated and the least stiff they can be the next morning. And that has been shown by research, peer-reviewed research. So different researchers have tried this. They've tried it in different ways and combinations. But that range of motion before bed is one of the key things. So for a lot of people, I say, let's kind of look at a time, maybe after you've read your book or after the news, or set something with a bit of a schedule, do your exercises and see how you feel the next morning. And a lot of people say, I'm not sure if it made that much difference. Okay, now try it without doing that. Just do your range of motion once a day like you were doing before or that one time. And sure enough, a lot of people say, yes, I was stiffer the next morning. And so try to reduce that stiffness. The range of motion can be one of the best things you can do. Another really important thing, how are you sleeping? What is your sleeping position like? The mattress, all the stuff. We have a class here through the Mary Pack Arthritis program that talks about sleep and arthritis. because the way we position ourselves, how we move, how we think about positioning ourselves in our joints when we're sleeping has a huge impact on how we feel in the morning. And sometimes people say, well, I slept so soundly, but I didn't move and I woke up more uncomfortable. And getting them to move just a little bit can help the body to feel a little bit less stiff in the morning. But that's going to be an individual thing. It's going to be dependent on whether you can breathe. Yeah, like, is your breathing good? You need to sleep in a certain position. Are there other things that we need to add in? Are there other ways that we need to look at, for some clients, building up your muscle mass to support, say, a hip joint? So when you sleep on that side, you don't have so much pressure on some of the bony parts of that. And so a real, like a complete arthritis program will look at what are the other aspects that's really difficult for you. And in the morning, we've got to look at some of those factors like the sleep and what you did the day before.
And also, if we're waking up first thing in the morning and very stiff, that stiffness is lasting, quite some time. I have a lot of people say that heat helps first thing in the morning. So whether they're going to take a hot shower before they're going to work or their exercise class, if you've got another kind of arthritis, like an ankylosing spondylitis, something that's really affecting your spine and hip area, again, that hot shower for a lot of people is beneficial first thing, just to kind of get things moving and grooving.
And again, sorry, with that range of motion, just to step off from what you just said, Tara, range of motion first thing, not always the most comfortable. It can feel really uncomfortable. So for some people, get up, get a cup of tea, get a cup of coffee, maybe have that hot shower, and then work with and listen to your body. Just really appreciating that your body's sending those messages to go slowly, and then get into those exercises when you can. And your body will come back up to the speed that you want it to be as quickly as it can with you at that point.
Okay, Michael, what do you think about people who are asking about taking pain medications either during exercise, before or after exercise, actually, to try to mitigate that pain that people are feeling? Yeah, what would you recommend there?
Pain medication, I'm not a pharmacist and I'm not a rheumatologist. And so I really can't talk about any specific medications, nor would I want to. One of the things I'd look at, though, we talked about how do we know how much is enough? And so we have the guidelines. We've got the 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous aerobic exercise, weights maybe 3 or 4 times a week. We want to look at some other things that we might add in depending on what your body needs. But if you're having, and if you can work within that, and also the 2-hour pain rule, that's going to give you a good idea of what your body can do without causing damage to the joints. If you're exercising a lot and then you're taking pain medication to help mitigate the pain you're having afterwards, you might be causing more joint damage. And so I think it really is important to look at and say, why am I needing this pain medication? Is there something else going on that I'm not aware of that I need to talk to my doctor about? Is it that I've just decided that's part of my whole day, is taking the pain medication? That, if it's done in conjunction with your rheumatologist, a rheumatology nurse, somebody who can help you to really understand that, can be important. But if you're doing it because you're taking your body through too much, that's when we need to step back and say, how can we get rid of this pain medication and see how you're feeling? Because if not, we're going to be pushing the joints further and further, and your need for that pain medication is simply going to get more and more and more as the arthritis continues.
Really helpful. My last question, are there any particular exercise programs that people should be looking at if they're waiting for surgery?
Exercise programs waiting for surgery, really, to be honest, what I tell most people is that the exercises that you'll be doing after your surgery, and so let's go back a little bit. When you say waiting for surgery, that's a big basket of different things that might be happening for people. And so no matter what happens, whatever surgery you're going to be having, talk to your surgeon and say, what should I be expecting? What do I need to be aware of? How do I prepare myself for this as effectively as possible? The two that I'm probably more aware of are going to be hip and knee surgery, because they're very common and they happen quite a bit here in British Columbia. The exercises that we do immediately after surgery are the same ones that I encourage people to be doing immediately before surgery. It's interesting how, and I feel a little bit tense saying this right now, because I know how it can seem for people with arthritis. But sometimes a joint can get to the point where it just seems like I can't do anything without a lot of pain. If that's the case, we want to try to maximize the joint lubrication, the joint nutrition. We want to try to maximize your range of motion within the limit of what your body will let you do. And so people find, my range of motion is becoming a little bit less, and I can feel my strength becoming less. Unfortunately, sometimes that's expected, and it's still good, so that once you have the surgery, you've been able to keep as much range of motion and as much strength as possible to start building again afterwards. There's nothing to say, if you keep doing this, you're going to maintain all of that. But if you can keep up with an exercise program and keep it going consistently, look at the 2-hour pain rule or the 1-hour pain rule. Guidelines at that point, for me, take a back seat, because as much as they're a wonderful goalpost to look at, they're not as important as your experience with your arthritic joints and how they're affecting your function throughout the day before you have that surgery. I hope that's helpful, but I'm not quite sure.
It's great, Michael. And thank you, Michael and Tara, thank you for sharing so much of your knowledge with us today. We've run out of time, but we would like to take a few moments to get the audience's feedback. So for those of you who are watching on the Zoom, you'll see a poll question come up on your screen with some answer options. So click on the response that does reflect your thoughts. I feel more knowledgeable and empowered after attending this webinar. And we will also be sending you an evaluation form when we email the recording and the slides. So if you weren't able to access that poll question, you'll have the opportunity to give us feedback then. And we really do use this survey feedback to shape our Arthritis Talks webinars, so we value your input very, very much. Once again, we are grateful to Massage Addict, Pfizer, and United Way Winnipeg for their financial support of this event. We will be concluding the Arthritis Talks portion of this webinar momentarily. We would encourage you, though, to visit Massage Addict's virtual information booth, where Dr. Laura Baxter-Gravel, licensed chiropractor, and Rubina Borg, registered massage therapist, will be available to answer your questions about how massage and chiropractic care may help support your mobility. You will have the opportunity to enter to win a free treatment as well. So to join that booth, visit arthritis.ca/booth or click on the link that's in the chat. The holidays are around the corner, and this holiday season, please consider making a donation to help end the agony of arthritis. Your support will drive life-changing treatments that are needed urgently. Thanks to a matching gift from the Raymond Chang Foundation, all donations before December 31st will have triple the impact. You could donate today at arthritis.ca/holidays. We will be back on January 11th for Arthritis Talks, Sleep Management. More information and the link to register will be included in an email to you tomorrow. So this concludes tonight's Arthritis Talks. On behalf of all of us at Arthritis Society Canada, we wish you a safe and happy holiday season. We are grateful to have you as part of our community and look forward to your continued support in 2024. Thank you so much.